Welcome to the SVG-TV news for Thursday, August 24th. I am Khalil Kato with the details. A stakeholders consultation to update the National Comprehensive Disaster Management CDM Strategy and Implementation Plan for St. Vincent and the Grenadines was hosted today by the National Emergency Management Organization (NEMO) through funding from the United States Agency for International Development Policy and Regulatory Reform for Resilience Activity, USAID PROS. The strategy and implementation plan is expected to be used to support the achievement of the goals and objectives of the recently updated National Comprehensive Disaster Management CDM Policy 2023. NEMO said the main objective of today's consultation was to examine the results statements identified in the Comprehensive Disaster Management Strategy and Implementation Plan 2020, alongside those proposed in the recently updated CDM Policy 2023, and the CDM Country Work Program to ensure that there is harmonization of the desired results and actions. Addressing the opening ceremony of the stakeholders consultation at the Seventh-day Adventist Mission Conference Room, Director of NEMO, Michelle Forbes, noted that they have put a lot of work into updating the national CDM strategy and policy since 2014.
And to update such a strategy requires tremendous resources, both human, physical, and financial. And we therefore need during the next few weeks as we update this plan, to really determine what it's going to take to implement the policy. So we can have a policy, but we must have a strategy on how we are going to implement it. And of course, the resources that are needed to cover it. And it is key because when we present this strategy to the various sectors who we're working with today, we want to know what it's going to take to implement it. We cannot just give you a document and say, hey, this is a CDM policy, this is a strategy. We need to know what the resources are going to, what resources will be needed. So I really want to thank you for being here throughout the journey. We have had several activities leading up to this session, and if it wasn't for your input, then we would have not been here at this stage today. Now, to also develop a policy and strategy, we needed financial resources externally. Initially, we would have had funding from the World Bank to update the policy, and then we approached Marinella and a team through the UE to whether they had funding to finish it for us, enhance the strategy and the implementation plan. And we wanted to thank our donors for really supporting us in this effort so that we can actually finish. I think we are seeing the finish line now. We're on the final stretch, right, Jeremy? We're on the final stretch, and I'm happy that we are at this stage.
Consultant for Disaster Risk Management and Resilience, Jeremy Collymore, said that today's consultation is a critical part of the journey from policy to action for comprehensive disaster management.
Often we have the policy but not the structured action. Secondly, that the CDM policy is anchored to the platform for risk-informed, evidence-based development that seeks to realize measurable and meaningful impact on people and their livelihoods. A key question that we will have to address is how the strategic plan can help us to buck what we have consistently called the implementation deficit, while advancing the agenda for resilient development. And in saying so, I reflect back on some of my early thinkings about what I characterize then as integrated and human-centered approaches to development. I'm even clearer in my belief, having gone through this process, that capacity and capability building are necessary but insufficient for shifting the current development inertia towards a resilience pathway. I would argue that more systemic thinking and approaches are essential here. A key part of this, I think, is a radical rethink of public sector programming, governance, and human resource development and management. Whilst we have condemned colonialism, we still embrace many of its structures in our public service. And these can challenge this notion that is really inherent to inclusivity and consultativeness in the system.
Collymore further told the stakeholders at the consultation that a comprehensive disaster management plan calls for processes that are more engaging, consultative, inclusive, and coordinated with the public sector, supported by the private sector and civil society.
Such processes provide the foundation for organizational sustainability and, more importantly, the continuity of government and services in times of crisis. And we've have some examples of that during the volcanic eruption and starting COVID. This must include careful consideration on how we manage capacity development to avoid it being concentrated on a few persons in the system. You know, in our system, there's one person in each organization who knows everything, and the others don't. That must change if you're going to have a resilient organization and a resilient system. Well, what I would suggest is this is an excellent opportunity, PS, for really advancing the mission of the Committee of Permanent Secretaries, and they will have a key role to play in this process. Secondly, in relation to programming, we have to give careful consideration to what I call program jettison, just to receive some money from a donor to do something that is not a priority, and rejig our whole program. And we must change that mindset. If it does not advance what we want to do, then we should really put it somewhere else. Secondly, realities are very important. So as we have this conversation today about the activities and actions to implement the strategy and plan, we have to be guided by realities, the constraints of our resources and our human capacity. It means that we must think about what we can do with the limited time and resources that we have. 5 activities are good. We don't have to have a whole 25. What is required, though, is clear, pragmatic thought on how to deliver the outputs we agree, who will be involved, and how these may be resourced, a point made earlier by Ms. Forbes. Our implementation environment is very dynamic, so we need to be flexible and adaptable if you're going to succeed in realizing what we will agree on today.
Meanwhile, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of National Security and Disaster Management, Hudson Ned, said updating St. Vincent and the Grenadines' CDM strategy is a critical step in the process of addressing the country's vulnerabilities, and the effort being made must keep people at the center.
For all of us who are here, I don't think it is difficult to understand that we have seen new dimensions, so to speak, in disaster, in the impact of hazards on our country, and the intensity at which they come at us. We have a myriad of hazards, even as we forge ahead in the development of our state. We have to contend with natural and man-made hazards. And indeed, comprehensive is a key reference in terms of making sure that we capture all of these elements and to plan for them. Comprehensive in terms of our people. We have different interests. Even represented in the room here today are persons from different sectors and entities, very important to the development of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And to some extent, we have tentacles leaving these agencies to counterparts in our OECS region and so on and beyond. It just goes to show that we have to plan for each other. We have to plan with each other in mind. We have to make sure that wherever we fall in this chain of development, that we can sustain our livelihood and productions.
Yes, Ned said efforts must also be made to ensure that the approach to the management of hazards and responses incorporates all the elements necessary for mitigation.
Just reactive. And what we have noticed is that when we have to be reactive, that it costs us tremendously more resource to address the fallout from the impacts of natural hazards. I also want to ask that this is not just an exercise for today. The updating of the plan, the content that goes into this has to be taken back to our own planning meetings in our various sectors and has to be interwoven. So it brings me to the expectation. Now, at this time of the year, the government is engaged in the development of its various corporate plans towards the 2024 national budget. Also, I know the Economic Planning Department of the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning is forging ahead with the revision of the National Economic and Social Development Plan. So we have indeed quite a bit going on, and there is really a need to make sure that the elements of this strategy gets into those documents, which again, the expectation is that they are working documents, that they are actually guiding the actions that we are, and our outputs that we are realizing in our various ministries and agencies.
In other local news, the opposition New Democratic Party is calling on the government to outline its plan to save the National Insurance Services, with a particular focus on the range of measures it is proposing to strengthen and ensure the institution's long-term stability. The party said in a news release that it is only through full transparency and accountability that everyone, opposition, trade unions and pensioners, can understand the scale of the reform required and the state of the fund, noting that the 11th Actuarial Review recommends the need for urgent reform. However, the government has failed to implement any of the measures recommended to protect people's pensions or set out any plans for reform. The NDP said the government has been told repeatedly by the IMF, the World Bank and the NIS actuary that it needs reform, but it has failed to take the tough decisions or take any action whatsoever. And because of the government's lack of action, the NIS is in crisis, which the party said is a mess of the government's own making. The NDP said it is committed to the long-term sustainability of the NIS fund and wants to protect those who need support, noting that their principles for reform are simple. It should be a standalone entity with the sole aim to act in the best long-term interest of its members. Investment decisions and fund management decisions should be made by an independent board. Assets and other investments should only be undertaken or divested if demonstrably in the best interest of the fund. Under any reforms, no person currently in the scheme should be worse off than they are at present. Transparency should be at the heart of everything the NIS does, with regular updates in a form and manner that is easily understood, that should be provided regularly to all. Noting that the executive director of the NIS has said reform will have to be made before 2024 in order to avoid draconian measures such as an increase in contribution rates by 10%, President of the NDP, Dr. Godwin Friday, said in the news release that the threat that faces the NIS is a problem created by the lack of action of the ULP government, which must stop playing politics and put the country first, as everyone will suffer the consequences. Meanwhile, the NIS is expected to hold panel discussions on August 30th on the 11th Actuarial Report to sensitize the Vincentian public on pension reform, bridge the gaps in the understanding of the pension reform process, and build public confidence and support in pension reform. An invite from the NIS said remarks will be delivered by Minister of Finance and Economic Planning Camilo Gonzalez and presentations made by panelists, Director of the NIS, Stuart Haynes, Deputy Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Valda Henry, Mr. Derek Osborne, FSA, Actuary, Telus Heath, Actuary and Consulting Actuary, Judith Vera. The NIS said the presentations will be on 1. Pension reform, a policy priority for Social Security in the ECCU territory, public policy. 2. Sound risk management, a critical success factor in pension reform, enterprise risk management policy. 3. Shaping investment governance and operations to support pension reform, investment policy. And 4. A governance-centric approach to funding long-term Social Security costs, funding policy. The panel discussion will take place at the NIS conference room from 6 p.m. St. Kitts and Nevis Prime Minister Dr. Terence Drew was expected here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines today for an official visit. A news release from his press secretary said the visit marks the first in a series of planned visits to the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States OECS nations during his tenure as the head of the OECS Authority, a position he assumed in June. The news release said Prime Minister Drew's visit to SVG aims to strengthen bilateral relationships and foster regional cooperation. During his visit here, he's expected to meet with several cabinet ministers, including Acting Prime Minister Montgomery Daniel, Minister of Finance Camilo Gonzalez, and Minister of Foreign Affairs Kiesel Peters. According to the news release, one of the key focal points of Prime Minister Drew's visit to SVG is to gain vulnerable insights into SVG's cannabis industry, recognizing the potential economic benefits and societal impact of the sector. Learn from SVG's experience and explore opportunities for collaboration and knowledge sharing. In addition to the cannabis industry, Prime Minister Drew is expected to engage in discussions with SVG's Foreign Affairs Minister and ministers in his related ministries, such as health, on common matters of importance. The news release said accompanying Prime Minister Drew on his official visit to SVG is Permanent Secretary in the Prime Minister's office, Naima Hazel, and they are expected to actively engage in bilateral meetings, fostering enhanced communication and collaboration between St. Kitts and Nevis and SVG. Prime Minister Drew is expected to return to the Federation of St. Kitts Nevis on Sunday, the 27th. Minister of Agriculture Saboto Caesar is encouraging farmers across St. Vincent and the Grenadines to expand their food production base by including more vegetables to meet the demands on the market. Speaking on NBC Radio's face-to-face program yesterday, the Agriculture Minister says it is important that farmers understand what foods are needed as the country expands its tourism and hospitality industry.
What we don't want to see happening in the country is that next year, when we have the opening of the hotel, the opening of the resort in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and the expansion that we are witnessing taking place, and all these rooms are opening, that we are getting more import permits to bring more carrots, to bring more tomatoes, to bring more cucumbers into the country. It means that we have to utilize the World Bank funding that we have at our disposal. We have to utilize it in a very strategic manner. And I know that there are several persons, hundreds of persons have applied thus far, but there's a significant focus that is going to be placed on vegetable production. And I want to encourage the farmers who are listening. Sometimes we are planting a commodity, we are producing a commodity that we have a lot of knowledge about, but sometimes it takes a very long period before you can reap. And in some instances, you have a period between planting and reaping of sometimes up to 9 months before you can reap. Many of these commodities that we're asking persons to be engaged in, the cauliflower, the broccoli, the cherry tomatoes, the sweet peppers of the different colors and varieties, the arugulas, the lettuce, the different varieties of lettuce, the cabbage, different colors, the purple cabbage. These are things that you can plant and reap within 3 months, 90 days, the butternut squash. And when you do that, you will be able to put yourself in a position whereby whilst you wait on some of the 9 months commodities, you'll be able to be reaping every 3 months from these different sets of commodities.
Minister Caesar is encouraging farmers to get up and get, noting that it is that should be noted that as a government, they are there to provide the enabling environment. However, farmers have to play their part.
Go and get a grand $27 million easy. Those monies will be available to you. We're able to get the urea from Venezuela, 40,000 sacks. Quite recently, we distributed 3,500 sacks of fertilizer from Morocco, and we will be getting some 10,000 sacks more over the next 12 months. We are distributing seedlings at a subsidized price. We are subsidizing fertilizer at the input warehouse. We have programs through different agencies like the FAO and AICA working in the different communities, rural transformation. We are just coming off of a program where $1 million was provided by the Jesus Christ Church of Latter-day Saints for the National Farm Labor Support Program, where over 200 acres was plowed in the red zone in North Windward. And you have persons going and planting their sweet potatoes and planting different types of crops.
Ministers of Agriculture from the OECS sub-region are expected to gather here next week for a major summit to address the implementation of the recently crafted Food and Agriculture Systems Transformation FAST strategy. The summit is expected to last 2 days, with day 1 being a Council of Ministers meeting and day 2 an active interaction with the private sector. The sessions will convene at the NIS conference room on August 31st and September 1st. The FAST strategy was recently launched in Grenada and was created to encompass central pillars of inclusive of establishing more efficient and sustainable methods for food and agriculture production, processing, and distribution in order to offset rising food costs, ensuring that the general public can access affordable and healthy foods. A panel discussion will take place on day 2 with presenters, Sandiford Edwards, expert in developmental finance with specialization in finance structuring, agriculture and SME finance, and climate renewable energy finance for small island developing states. Professor Leonard Ogaro, plant pathologist, biotechnologist, and regional agribusiness advisor. Sunita Daniel, Chief Executive Officer of Export St. Lucia, the national agency responsible for trade and export promotion in St. Lucia, and Damian Bowen, Managing Director of one of the region's largest insurance brokers, Lynch Caribbean Brokers. The panelists are expected to address different aspects of the OECS FAST strategy. The Intermediate High School will be offering agriculture science to its students as part of the Caribbean Secondary Education Certificates CSEC curriculum in the 2023-2024 academic year. This follows the signing of a Memorandum of Understanding on Tuesday between the Zero Hunger Trust Fund and the school. Principal of the Intermediate High School, Mona Green, thanked the Zero Hunger Trust Fund for partnering with the school on the initiative. Green noted that agriculture science is an important subject and that the land space is available at the school to facilitate the subject, which also has a practical component. Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Zero Hunger Trust Fund, Safia Horn-Debeek, said the signing of the MOU is an extension of the school's agriculture science program, which started last year. Debeek said the Zero Hunger Trust Fund supports the agriculture science programs in schools to meet its mandate, which is to end hunger. Minister of Agriculture, the Honorable Saboto Caesar, Minister of Education, the Honorable Curtis King, and Minister of Tourism, the Honorable Carlos James, also spoke at the signing ceremony. The ministers commended the Intermediate High School and the Zero Hunger Trust Fund for embarking on the initiative, which will ensure food security in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. They pledged their ministries' commitments to the program, noting that they will provide assistance to the students. Since 2019, the Zero Hunger Trust Fund has supported agriculture science programs at secondary schools to provide students with opportunities to enhance their knowledge of sustainable agriculture policies, practices, and techniques, along with methodologies, and to explore avenues for sustainable livelihoods in agriculture. Contestant number 7 in the Miss SVG Pageant 2023, Simisha Millington, sponsored by Careers Ace Hardware, will be completing her GECU community service project on the silver economy. Millington's project, Silver Rocks, will run from August 28th to September 3rd.
To encourage the elderly to live their best life no matter their age, to be happy, healthy, and to stay active, to teach our youth how to care and support for the elderly. Also, to sensitize the caregivers. This includes the social services. We need to have patience, empathy, love while we care for the elderly, as one day, if we are so lucky, we would be the silver ones. I would like you to take a moment and reflect. When was the last time you visited your grandmother or called your grandfather besides on his birthday or for Christmas? When was the last time you visited an elderly person in your community? Remember, they are our country's pillar, the core, our society, the nation builders. We need to do unto others as we would like to have them do unto us.
Millington will commence her community service project on August 28th with an opening ceremony at the Kittels Police Station featuring a number of speeches and entertainment.
The Tuesday, we shall be having home visits and a home solution improvement day. And this is our opportunity to lend a listening ear, to share the stories and the words of encouragement from our silvers to our younger generation. We will also be donating home improvement products courtesy of Courace Ace Hardware. On the Wednesday, we will be having an archery and dance aerobic classes called Training Rocks at the Courace Ace Hardware Pembroke location from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., which will be done by SVG Archery Association and D's Fitness. On Thursday is our health fair titled Testing Rocks at the Clare Valley Clinic from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. You shall expect a speech from a professional nutritionist and free blood sugar and blood pressure testing with distribution of healthy snacks and guides for a healthier diet, plus a special raffle. The Friday, I want you to come out from 5 p.m. until and rock your key for our night of karaoke and fun games at the Desire Club located in Kittels. We would be having the chance to play traditional games such as bingo, domino, cards, checkers, and more, with fun prizes to be won. On Saturday, I would be tapping into my inner tour guide, and we will be kayaking from the Bocamet Bay Beach to the Biohub Bay. For this activity, registration will be opened from the 28th of August. And as your lucky number 7, I do not think my week would be completed without a 7th day of activities. So we shall be uplifting rocks at our church day, which will be hosted at the Chauncey Methodist Church from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. After which, we would visit the shut-ins with donations.